Your Elizabethan Era notes. There's a section there called Shakespeare's World that we're going to try to get tackled today, and then we will start with the play on Monday. Now, next week we have ITED, but that should not affect this class. And we have an early out because we have to make up that safety that we lost because of the blizzard on Monday or Tuesday, and so, but that won't affect this class either. It'll affect 7th hour. So, all right. So Shakespeare's World. I have a little picture there of the globe, and if you look on your notes, you'll notice that we're also going to talk about the globe. We hit it a little bit the day before yesterday. We did yesterday. All of you should have received the YouTube link, and you should watch the YouTube link and fill in the notes. Okay, it wasn't that long, was it? There's a lot of space in it. Could you hear? Because I did walk away a couple of times. Did you hear okay? Or yeah, or did you lose me? Sorry. That's why you guys got to give me the. This is going to sound wrong, but give me the finger and make me go back by this thing where the microphone is. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about Shakespeare, and just to review really quickly at your tables, talk to the voices in your head if you want to. Pick an idiom, pick something about tomatoes or lead, or I always think the grave rituals of like how they had to be buried with a bell on their hand. Share something that you learned about Elizabethan Era with the people at your table, just real quick. So, all right, so if we look at this next screen, okay, if you were to look at those illustrations, which are a little bit smaller than I thought. Oh, undo. Okay, that was a canopy. Okay, who wants to take something and tell me what they thought it means? This is a pot, by the way. I'm going to see if it. Oh, it is going to make me let them bigger. Okay, is there anything here that you can? What can you tell me about these things? Anybody want to take one? Okay. Bread was part of the upper crust in what way, or? Okay. This is a little person, a person's portrait with a dog. What does that have to do with Elizabethan Era? Here we go. So sometimes the Elizabethan Era is called the Renaissance Era, and this is a very famous painting of this time frame. I'm going to try to make it bigger because the screen has changed a little bit. And you know, it's a little dark period that we grew up in. We wouldn't know any different. You notice that there's a lot of ale. It is a lot of poverty. There's a lot of movement, a lot of chaos. I don't think there's anything behind here. Oh, okay, so we want to talk a little bit about this time period. Okay, so it began in the 14th century, and remember that what is difficult about that is that 14th century means it's a 1300s. So anything in the 1300s is considered part of the Renaissance. Okay. And this is when they call intellectual activity flourishes. It means that they were all about science, commerce, philosophy. All of those things were really important during the Renaissance. They really emphasized people had individual choices. Okay. Sometimes it's called the Elizabethan Era. Okay. I know I didn't leave you a lot of room there next to the picture with Elizabeth there, but just the really big thing about this is that it emphasized the individual and the idea of freedom of choice. So many of Shakespeare's plays revolve around the person in the story, whoever's the main character, that they had a choice and they are free to make that choice. And of course, that's very democratic. And that flows down to us when we came to this country in the 1600s. Okay? And Queen Elizabeth, we had a big part of that. Okay? So Queen Elizabeth, okay? She is the last in line of the Tudor family, Tudor. So when you go to England, you can visit Tudor Castle. Henry VII was her grandfather, and he brought a lot of stability to England. But her dad is where her problems began. He was Henry VIII. I don't know if you know the great Beatles song, Henry VIII, I Am, I Am. Henry VIII had a problem with being faithful to his wife. In fact, he had several wives. And he fell in love with a woman by the name of Anne Boleyn, but he was Catholic at the time, and the Catholic Church would not let him get a divorce because that was against Catholic doctrine. And so this is the excuse he used. You have to give me a divorce because she hasn't given me a son. They had two daughters, and the church said that's not enough reason to divorce her just because she hasn't given her a son. So then he said, but we've never had sex. And the Pope was like, well, you got two girls there. He's like, no. Well, the Pope still wouldn't give him a divorce, so King Henry VIII, as all good monarchs do, threw a temper tantrum and said, fine, I'm going to start my own church. And he did. It's called the Church of England. And it is the Church of England that is going to marry Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. That started because he couldn't get a divorce. Elizabeth was one of his children, and Elizabeth is known as a very strong leader. It is not, of course, the same Elizabeth that we have today, although you know from watching, reading People magazine, that they named their children after previous queens. And so the Queen Elizabeth II that we have right now is named after this Queen Elizabeth. And they do have a lot in common. They were both very good leaders. They were far-sighted. They could see beyond themselves. And it was during Queen Elizabeth's time that Shakespeare really flourished. Okay? All right. I'm going to pause. You missed it, but everybody was a genius. There we go. So now we're going to talk about the power of imagination. In Elizabethan or Shakespeare's world, they had no curtains, no lighting, no scenery. Anything that was visual done for the play was done through props, sound effects. They had amazing sound effects, costumes, and dialogue. Also, women were not allowed on stage. Just the young boys played the parts. And as I talked about in your video yesterday, is that young boys between the ages of 12 and 14 played all the parts. And so when you played Romeo and Juliet, that's why Juliet's up on a balcony and Romeo's down below, because you didn't want the proximity because they were of the same gender. The theater was seen as too scandalous for women to be a part of. Okay? All right, so Lord Chamberlain's men built the globe. Okay? Lord Chamberlain was it's the next page, yep. Lord Chamberlain was the person that kind of had their troops, and then Shakespeare started working for him. And the really cool thing about theater is that theater was not for the rich. And some people have a lot of problems with that because today it seems like theater is for the rich. For example, my family really wanted to go to Hamilton in Des Moines. That's going to be here in June. The nosebleed sections sitting in the very last row behind a pole is $325 a ticket. Theater has turned into kind of a rich man's hobby, okay? But in the beginning, it was meant for all social eras. So the poor were with the upper class, with everybody, because it appealed to everybody. And theater still appeals to everybody. And so it is really a source of contention among Broadway and stuff. It's gotten too expensive for people to be able to go. All right, so now you have that globe picture there, okay? So notice that the globe actually held a lot of people. It held over 3,000 people, and I think you have that to circle, okay? And this is close to the same picture, a little bit different. So there would be a courtyard. The courtyard would be, kind of, we might call it the lobby. but you could still see the stage. The pit is the pit. In today's era, who goes to the pit? The orchestra, okay? So that's the way down. But the pit is where all of the working class people, and you have to understand, theater in this time, they threw things at the actors or actresses. So if you sucked, they didn't eat tomatoes, but they threw them, okay? The inner balconies, as you can see, you can kind of see the lines there, okay? That was kind of the further away from the pit you got, the more you were wealthy, the wealthier you were. And they actually dealt with a raised platform or stage. And their stages were at an angle, like this. So people could see it. And that's why that is called downstage, and this is called upstage. We don't have that anymore because what do we slant? We don't slant the stage anymore. What do we slant? The seats. Okay? So that's why our seats are, it's called raked. You rake your stage. Okay? But now, today, we rake our auditoriums. Let's go that way. Okay. So, what is the impact of Shakespeare? Okay. He became the master of dramatic language. And when we're talking about dramatic language, we're not talking about teenage drama, like, no offense, girls. Girls love drama. Girls say they hate drama, but they like to create it. We're talking dramatic means he became the master of what a play is. And so whenever anybody wants to, be considered a master, they're going to follow kind of Shakespeare's structure, okay? Second, he is the most quoted writer of the English language. What comes in first? The Bible, right? And it is true. If you know your Bible and you know Shakespeare, you're going to catch 90% of all allusions. Mythology is third. He contributed more words, phrases, and expressions to the English language than anybody else. So if I was to say to Destiny, go on a wild goose chase, I would be quoting Shakespeare. Okay? He influenced thousands of future authors. And he influenced theaters and changed people's perception of theater. The church thought theater was evil, and with Shakespeare, they changed their mind. And then it sounds crazy, and with Shakespeare, they changed their mind back because he had some pretty raunchy. We're going to explain some jokes in here that are going to make some of you blush, and it makes me blush telling the jokes, but I believe in full disclosure. So we will be embarrassed at different times as I discuss the play. The last little bit is that he illuminated the human experience. In other words, what some of these people went through in the 1400s, we go through today. Okay? Romeo and Juliet are called the star-crossed lovers. Well, we have star-crossed lovers today as well. Families that fight. Parents that don't listen to their children. Children that don't listen to their parents. He deals with universal themes. And he makes these characters and these stories come alive. And he just had a natural ability to turn a phrase. We have the background information, and starting on Monday, we'll start reading our play, and we will get into Romeo and Juliet. So your assignment for this weekend is simply to read, because I guarantee you this next week, we are probably not going to get a lot of in-class time to read. Most of it will be your homework, okay? All right, have a great weekend, and we will see you guys on